Hi there, it's Adam here from adaminsights.com, a great online resource for Leica film and digital body reviews, Leica lens reviews, printing techniques, camera film reviews, and a whole lot more. I'd really love to have your support by checking out my website and yeah, even some feedback as well. I want to make it a great online resource for the photographic community around the world. Okay, so in this video I want to talk about the Fuji C200 camera film. This is a really sharp, color accurate, highly detailed and inexpensive camera film that has really impressed me. And when I'm on the topic of it being inexpensive, I would be happy to pay twice the price on it, but don't tell my dealer that. In fact, on that, I'm actually just going to make a quick ethics statement here. Every film, every camera, every lens, everything that I review, I have personally bought and paid for, or it's been loaned to me. I never accept any money to do a review, and I never accept any contra or anything to do a review. Everything which I've reviewed and I've exhibited on my YouTube channel or my website, I pay for completely. Also on that, I just want to do a quick shout out to my dealer. That's PhotoCo in Adelaide. Now, I deal with them because they have easily the best range of camera film available off the shelf for all of us who are film lovers. They've got, wow, so many black and white and colour films from all of the manufacturers and loads of indie manufacturers as well. It's brilliant. It's like film heaven. Also, when it comes to getting film processed, they tend to bend over backwards as far as getting something done in a really tight turnaround, which they did for me quite recently. When it comes to Leica, their pricing and range available in store is really second to none. I've never been able to find someone who can beat their price on Leica equipment. Plus, they've actually got a really good website for selling their second-hand range as well. Check it out. I'll put the link in the description. It's worth checking out for if you're looking for something secondhand and you want to know that it's coming from a reputable source. They definitely check everything out, and I trust everything that they sell secondhand. I've definitely been very happy with a lot of purchases from PhotoCo as well. I've been happy with all of my purchases from PhotoCo, really. So there you go. Anyway, let's get on to the point of the video, Fuji C200. And why do I think this film is so great? Well, number one, it's really color accurate. The color range, or just the colors from this film, are absolutely beautiful. They are so true to life, but they're a little bit vibrant, but they just look so accurate, and they just don't need any post-processing. You know what? Look at this. We've actually got a photographic review video where we're actually holding up prints as well. Isn't that something a bit unique these days? Most of the time we just put it up on the screen. Anyway, I'll put this up on the screen as well so you can have a closer look. But what I really like about the images from Fuji C200 is that the colours just seem to be so natural, and they have a nice little pop to them as well. Something else which I'm just going to say here, all of the images which I show to you in this video, I don't do any editing on the colour, I don't do any white balance tweaking, I don't do any post sharpening, I don't do any adjustments to the contrast or the exposure unless I say that I am, just for experimental reasons as well. So the colours with C200 are beautiful, and that's something a bit new for me with Fuji, because I've often found that Fuji tends to either be ultra oversaturated, and that's a nice look if that's what you want, but Fuji can be a bit oversaturated sometimes, or they can actually be a bit muted with, say, Fuji Pro 400. So I've never actually found a sweet spot which I truly like with Fuji color film until I've tried C200. I've normally been a Kodak film lover, but then that probably introduces other factors as well, which I haven't been, it's introduced other factors, and you know, I tend to think that maybe some of the Kodak films tend to be too good in some cases. But this Fuji just seems to have a nice natural and real colour that looks really nice. Check out some of the samples on my website. Now, while we're on colour and while we're on how the film handles the light, I want to talk about the dynamic range. Particularly this shot here, which I took this shot specifically to illustrate this point. We've got the highlights, and details get retained in the highlights, details are retained in the midtones, and details get retained in the shadows. And that's actually really special because this shot probably illustrates it a little bit better. The film is actually really sharp and highly detailed. Now, sharpness and detail are very, very different things in photography. But what's actually really special about what's going on with the C200 is that even though we've got a really nice sharp image, we're not going overboard with the contrast. Now, this is a really important point to make because particularly when you think about a lot of the consumer films out there, if consumer films like Kodak Gold, for example, need to look really sharp, they tend to have to be very, very contrasty to create nice sharp outlines. And the problem with that is that it tends to crush the blacks and blow out the highlights. So you lose all of the detail in the black, in the shadows and in the highlights, and probably a lot of details in the midtones as well, because the grain tends to be a bit larger to create more defined lines in the image, and so all your fine detail is lost. This is where Fuji C200 again is being quite special, because we've got a really nice sharp image going on here, but we've got a lot of fine detail, and we've got a lot of fine detail in the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. So it's really special for colour, and it's really, really special for how sharp and detailed the images are. And you know what? I would actually go so far as to say, in 2020, if you were to put the same lens on a megapixel monster body, I mean, we're up to like, 50, 60 megapixels in full frame DSLRs these days. If you were to put the same lens on a digital body, and then take the same shot with the same lens on a film body with C200, I reckon that Fuji C200 could give that digital sensor, be it from Canon, Nikon or Sony, a serious run for its money as far as detail and clarity goes if you were to expose it right and you were to scan it right. Now, onto exposure with C200. I will say that this film doesn't need a lot of post-editing, and I actually don't think this film responds very well to post-editing, or it doesn't respond as well to post-editing as some other types of film. And I'll show you why in a sec, but this film works beautifully with available light. And that's, as a street photographer, that's the way I like to shoot. If I was shooting in a studio and I could control the light, I'd probably pick a different film. But Fuji C200 with available light just works beautifully. The colors and the rendition and the different tones in the image just come out really perfect, really nice. Now, there are some films that do it better, and I'll use the example here of Kodak Pro 100. So here, this was a long exposure, but the thing I like about Kodak Pro 100 is that it seems to leave the shadows really, really open. Now, Kodak Pro 100 isn't as good as Fuji C200 as far as detail and sharpness and some color ranges go, in my view, but Kodak Pro 100 is better than Fuji C200, particularly in that it keeps the shadows open big time, but then Fuji C200 keeps the shadows open to a usable level, which just makes the pictures look correct and natural if you're just working with available light. So onto editing. So if you have a look at this picture which I took here of the inside of a bus early one morning on the way to work, I exposed it for the light that was outside through the windscreen. The rest of the bus is quite dark. Now let's just try and lift up the exposure and bring the highlights down. Yeah, sure enough, we can do it, but it does tend to bring out the grain in the shadows quite a lot, and you don't get that kind of a response out of other films. So if you do need to try and edit your photos quite a lot, and you need to do a lot of post-editing to post-corrections on your images, C200 isn't quite right. C200 will give you a beautiful image if you expose it right. Okay, so just lastly, I want to talk about the grain structure of C200. Here it is, image of, well, a crop in of the sky at 100% on an image. I will actually go so far as to say the grain structure of C200, so 200 ISO film, is not as strong as Kodak Pro 100. I will say that looking at 8x12 prints, this is a Pro 100 image, I can definitely see the grain in the image with the Pro 100 prints. The same size on C200, I can't see the grain in the sky, and that's even taking the same shot. So I will say that C200 has a beautiful fine grain, and being 200 ISO, it's got a slight speed advantage over the Kodak Pro 100 ISO. So on to the last thing, the price. The price of this film is, well, it's one of the least expensive films that you can currently buy, at least for me in South Australia. And that seriously impressed me. It's a great film that I can use for a lot of natural light during the day. If I do want to shoot after dark, I will probably choose a different film, particularly Kodak Pro 100, because it does tend to leave the shadows open quite a lot, and it works with it works with street lights probably a lot nicer than C200. But that said, C200 just seems to render things beautifully, and I would really go so far as to say C200 could definitely hold its own against some of the best 45, 50, 60 megapixel sensors of 2020 and beyond.